This is Unsupervised Learning, Redpoint's AI podcast. And today we have on Baris Gultekin, Snowflake's head of AI. Baris leads Snowflake's wide-ranging AI efforts, including products like Cortex, AI Data Cloud, and launching their own LLM architecture. Typically on this show, we interview founders building AI products. Baris is a little different. He's working on the infrastructure that supports AI tools in production, and was able to share a lot of really interesting insights about the types of use cases he's seeing most, and commentary on when things are working like fine-tuning and RAG. This was a really fun conversation with one of the most important infrastructure players in the AI ecosystem. Here's Baris. Thanks so much for coming on.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
I feel like there's so many different places we can start because you have a really broad kind of AI product portfolio at Snowflake. Maybe the best place to start would be with just Arctic LLM and obviously your kind of efforts on the open source model side.
Yes.
What goes into like an effort like that? When did you decide like, hey, we kind of need our own model? And, how many folks does it take to kind of get something like that up and running?
So that effort was relatively small compared to some of the others in the market. We started in December or so timeframe when we wanted to have our own model because a lot of our customers really want to build kind of BI type experiences using AI. Mm-hmm. And there, of course, text to SQL, natural language, from natural language to SQL to data really matters. So we wanted to build a large language model that can do SQL really well, that can also follow instructions really well. And a lot of the models out there are great, but when it comes to SQL, there's a lot of complexities. And so we wanted to invest in the space broadly. We were really fortunate to get amazing researchers from DeepSpeed as well as VLLM. Like these are kind of founders of these two projects. And once we got the team together, and it's a relatively small team, we were able to build the model in a 3-4 month time frame and then release it.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I think you said when it came out, which I liked, is that you were like, look, this is an LLM that's specifically for enterprise needs. We were not going to be your best on composing poetry, right. But we'll probably be pretty good on the SQL Copilot and high quality chatbot. Like, what goes on behind the scenes to make those optimizations for a model that's particularly good at that and maybe isn't going to do our Shakespeare sonnets?
Actually, surprisingly, it does those as well. But there were a couple of things that went into it. First of all, the team had a pretty innovative architecture. We really focused on making the model really efficient, very efficient to train, as well as efficient to do inference as well. We were able to build the model at 1/8 the cost of kind of similar models out there. And once we get the architecture right for that optimization, it was all about, do we get the data recipe? How do we make sure that the data recipe is correct? And we spent a lot of time on that and then getting that data right. And then just got the model ready.
And what are some of the ways that people are using Arctic today? There's kind of the BI side of things, SQL generation, but also you allow people to run the LLMs within their Snowflake or on their Snowflake data.
Yeah, that's right. So at Snowflake, we have this product called Cortex. Mm-hmm. Cortex is our managed service that allows us to run all these large language models, our own Arctic, as well as many others, like from Mistral, from Meta, and so forth. And customers tend to do 3 major things. One is, we talked about kind of AI for BI type use cases. Mm-hmm. The other one is the traditional build a chatbot for talking to their unstructured data, documents, PDFs. And then perhaps uniquely Snowflake, we have a lot of structured data in Snowflake as well as semi-structured data. Mm-hmm. So a lot of our customers kind of use natural language to extract data from text and then process it later. So a lot of text analytics, natural language processing, understanding what is happening in sales call logs and customer support tickets and all sorts of other kind of semi-structured text. Just processing all of it in batch is a big use case.
I guess for two of those use cases, like maybe the BI use case and the data extraction use case, might be helpful just to level set from you on like, where are we today? And like, when does it work? When does it not work? Yeah. Like, what are you kind of seeing on the ground?
Yeah, I mean,
it always works.
Yeah. I'll start with the BI one because that is the one that is the trickiest. We call that a iceberg problem. And it's very easy to build demos, but the real world is incredibly messy, right? You have today, a lot of people look at Spider, for instance, for SQL performance, but Spider is relatively simplistic versus the real world data. We have customers that have tens of thousands of tables, hundreds of thousands of columns with weird names, Rev 1, Rev 2. What are you going to use? What is the revenue? And so forth. We focused a lot on getting the quality right. And turns out it's not just get an LLM ready and the ask the question and LLM does the job for you. Instead, you need to stitch together a series of systems so that ultimately you increase the quality. So we built this product called Cortex Analyst, which is a combination of 3-4 LLMs working together to answer BI questions. It knows when to ask for clarifications, when not to answer questions that it can't answer. And then we have these systems that are kind of self-healing, generating SQL, checking the validity of that SQL as well. So it's a pretty complex system. Getting it right is hard. We were able to get the quality in our own efforts up to 90-95% range. It's good for many use cases, but not still for all. When you're talking about BI type use cases, you don't want to just put that in front of the CFO and completely trust that the revenue number is always right. So we're also building in things like human in the loop systems to make sure our customers are building it correctly.
And is all of its work today, does it do the SQL generation, but then that can be edited by a human? So it's kind of, or is there, does it do multi-step stuff?
So it does multi-step stuff, and then there's a feedback loop in that customers can basically create what we're calling verified queries. And then, if we can answer a query using a verified query, we tell, we return that in the API so that there is increased confidence.
Very cool.
And then there is a workflow component of it that you can keep adding verified queries.
Where do these models kind of like fall on their face today in the BI space?
In the BI space, the hardest thing is getting these complex joins right. Each company has their own data model, and then there's an art to creating these data models that are unique to these companies. Semantic understanding of that whole space is a big area of focus. So these models tend to get they might hallucinate on column names, for instance. They might get the joins wrong. Sometimes they write queries that are not going to execute, and so forth. So there are a lot of things that might fall flat. So a huge amount of work goes into how do you go from 100,000 column names to the right ones to provide to the LLM? How do you make sure that when the LLM creates the response, it is relevant? When somebody asks a question, how do you know that can actually be answered? So there are a lot of gotchas to get right, and LLMs will gladly give you an answer even when they should not be. So there's a lot of work to do there.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you've stitched together a lot of different things to make this work end to end. Like, what are some of the things you've learned over time that you've added on, like to make that kind of stitching better?
So we've very consciously focused on precision and sacrificing on recall, and that's a product choice that we are consciously making. We should not be answering all the questions. Instead, we should know when not to answer. We should know when to ask for clarifications, for instance. So we did not start there. Yeah. We started a lot broader, and we can do all the joins, and then we can ask us anything. And that's actually an okay route for an analyst. Very open-ended. You can ask questions of your data. You can explore, and it's okay if you're not right all the time, because the analyst knows if you got 80-90% of it right, I'll correct the rest.
Totally.
When it comes to business users, you don't have that luxury. So you need to narrow it down quite substantially so that you increase the quality.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And then on the data extraction side, I guess, which is another key use case you guys have, where does it work today? Where do you see the models kind of fall on their face?
So there, I actually think things are pretty good. The types of interesting use cases we're seeing is, you have a large data set, and you want to not just ask questions for each of the cells, but rather all of the cells combined. So, a recent interesting example is we ran a employee survey, and then there's an open-ended set of questions in the employee survey. So now you can ask the LLM, of all the questions, just summarize it. What are the categories? Give me examples, give me example quotes and so forth. So something that would have taken a couple of hours of kind of HR digging in can now be a prompt and just goes through everything and then summarizes it. So I think there's a lot of super interesting opportunities to make this work well and work easily. So one of the things that we really focus on is how do we make sure whatever we do is from a customer perspective, very, very simple and easy to use. And that's an ethos Snowflake has. Make everything super easy. So when it comes to an analysis like this, we've been building, task-specific functions that just don't require customers to do a lot of the prompt as well as the data pipeline work. Instead, they can just use one of those functions off the shelf.
Yeah. Well, I know we've hit on a bunch just in the early part of this conversation, but it might be helpful to just take a step back for our listeners and kind of contextualize. You guys do a lot of different AI things at Snowflake, so maybe just kind of give us the surface area of different AI products at Snowflake today.
Yeah, we're doing quite a lot. So at the core of what we do is Cortex, which is our inference engine. It's running all the large language models, and then on top of that, we have two products. Like one is Cortex Search. We focused a lot on having a very high quality search. It's really important for RAG, and then the other one is Cortex Analyst, the BI product. So we think of that as talk to your unstructured data and talk to your structured data. For Cortex Search, a huge focus has been on quality. So we have our own embedding model, Arctic Embed, which is the state of the art. We focused on that model to be not only high quality, but also very efficient. So Arctic Embed is a quarter the size of OpenAI's embedding model, while still having a higher benchmark score compared to some of the other competition out there.
And obviously, it seems like smaller models have been a focus. Is that like mostly latency and speed for your customers, or does cost actually end up being enough of a factor here to really drive it?
I mean, it is all of it. So cost is a big factor, and we're seeing the market come down quite a lot on cost. And the way the market is coming down on cost is by distilling these large models into smaller and smaller models. And these small models are incredibly effective and efficient. Yeah.
And on the search side, is that more internal, like the Snowflake example you said, where I have a bunch of data and I want to, search or run some queries over it? Or are people building kind of external user-facing RAG type applications on it?
We're seeing three different kinds of applications. We're seeing external RAG applications, definitely. And there, the focus is on, of course, quality, reduced hallucinations, knowing when to abstain from answering the question there is also really important. Cortex Search is a hybrid search system. It does both vector search as well as lexical keyword search, so we can reduce hallucinations. Another use case that we're seeing a lot of internal use cases, of course. Internal use cases are the most common ones. They are, increased productivity, but low risk from a, hallucination perspective. A third kind of surprising use case is just regular enterprise search. So enterprise search is back. Glean is doing a phenomenal job, for instance. We're seeing our customers really interested in how do I, upgrade my stack, and Cortex Search helps there as well.
And then I guess I feel like such a strong part of the Cortex story is the fact that you sit on top of a lot of interesting data already. I think a lot of folks are thinking through, like, what do we have to do with the data that we do have, the data that we get in production when we deploy these models to kind of get the data flywheel going? Like, what are you learning on the ground in terms of, what makes people effective at doing this?
A lot of large companies have these governance boards, AI governance boards. So the first step is making sure that the company feels comfortable with the platform of choice for running AI. Yeah. So, trust, making sure that the data is secure, the data governance is respected, and the policies are acceptable for the company. So a huge focus actually goes there, ensuring the company feels comfortable. With Snowflake running all these AI systems right next to the data, we can answer some of these questions and provide reassurances for the company. But that's the first step. So once the company feels okay, then the question is, okay, so I have all my data here. How do I build a high quality a chatbot or something else? And then how do I have this data flywheel? We've recently acquired a company called Truera. And
you guys have done a lot of acquisitions. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. So Truera is has this product, open source, called TrueLens. TrueLens is an observability LLM evaluation platform. So we're finding that to be great for our customers. There's a lot of, you build a system and then evaluation is a problem. You ask a couple of questions and then you don't know if this is good, this is bad. Is it better than another model that I should be using perhaps? When we bring a full stack solution from an evaluation perspective, like that eases concerns. And then you can run evaluation at scale with LLMs as judges. So that usually is a core part of how our customers are starting to think about production systems. So far, up until recently, everything was just POCs, and there you don't need to think about any of them.
Are we seeing a transition yet? We're always eagerly awaiting.
We are seeing transitions. We're seeing transitions slowly, right? For internal use cases, for productivity use cases, for analysis, we're definitely seeing transition from POCs to production. For external use cases, I think there's still more confidence that needs to be there before large-scale production systems get built.
What do you think the timeline is for like widespread external deployments, and what would need to happen to get there? Is it just people have to spend a little more time with technology and get comfortable, or are there some actual changes in capabilities or in guardrails that need to happen?
I think it's both. I think people are becoming more comfortable with the technology. I think there is product innovation needed as well to get the end user to be comfortable with the answer not always being right, possibly, and then kind of mechanisms to check whether this is right or wrong. So I think there's an opportunity there. And then, of course, technology keeps getting better, but it's not quite there yet. There's still risks for hallucination, which in some cases, especially in regulated industries, can be quite catastrophic.
I would imagine on the privacy and security side, you guys have a huge advantage, right? Because you're already storing everyone's data, so then it's a good story to go to everyone and say, "Hey, you can run, you can run our model right next to your data." Does all of the inference happen within Snowflake Cloud? Do you allow people access to models outside of that, and then how do you think about that going forward?
Yes, it's a huge value proposition to run everything right next to the data inside Snowflake. So all of our models are running inside Snowflake right now. For customers who want to use external models, we also have solutions, but that's not default. So they can configure it so that they can use external models if they choose so. The governance of the data plays a huge role. So at Snowflake, governance is built from the ground up so that our customers are setting up very granular access controls. The example I'd like to use is, let's say that a company builds a HR chatbot. Then you ask a question, who got promoted last week? So first of all, depending on who asks that question, you need to give very different answers. And then there is very little room for
hallucination,
data leakage, right? So that points to the importance of getting the governance right. And then we're seeing having that be a core part of the platform from the ground up is a huge advantage.
Yeah, that's a much better example than the one I was thinking of, which I don't want Jacob to access my SQL query because he's going to mess it up with whatever he's doing. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense on the RAG application side.
Yeah.
How do you actually build that like access control into a model?
So first of all, even before AI came into the picture, we had granular access controls required. At Snowflake, it's a very granular system. You can basically grant any object, a database object access.
I guess what new things do you have to do when an LLM comes into the picture?
So I'll use search as the example. So for instance, we had to build access controls very deeply into search. So when you search for a document, that filtering needs to be there so that you can the search system only gives you access to the documents that you have access to. So for AIs, for search, that's a big part. And then we rely on already existing access controls for the data part. So when you ask a question, if you can't access the data, then you don't get that data. But having that be already built in is a huge advantage. A lot of our customers spend a couple of years getting the governance of their data in place. So now they can benefit from that and then build AI on top of it.
Makes sense. And good luck to the next person trying to recreate that.
Yeah.
I guess, obviously a big part of, you're probably working hand in hand with these enterprises who are building these applications. What kind of advice are you giving them, or what are you noticing on like when it makes sense to just take a model off the shelf, fine tune it a bit, maybe train your own model from scratch? Like, what are you kind of seeing?
I mean, we're recommending starting with the large models and then building, POCs. And usually, a large model plus a RAG solution, gets you quite far. And then once everything is in place, then the optimization starts for the production system. Like, then you can start fine-tuning a smaller model that can give you kind of scale advantages from a latency perspective, from a cost perspective. For companies that have a large amount of unique data set, then custom models also make sense. Having built Arctic in a very efficient way, now it doesn't have to be outrageous to build your own very specific custom model for your own needs. So for some small number of customers who are interested in kind of building their own models, pre-trained models, we also work with them to do that.
What are some of the examples that jump out to you as it probably makes sense to build your own pre-trained model there?
Usually in regulated industries, this becomes a desired thing. Our customers will want to have full control over what data goes into the model, for instance, as well as they have healthcare is a good example. Unique language that they use. So again, the French sonnet isn't necessary, but understanding the business is important.
And for those, are they training their own model within Snowflake? Are you guys supporting training today? Or it seems like kind of inference, at least a lot of the messaging has been more on you can use any of the models and we focus on inference. But how do you think about
from a volume perspective, a huge part is inference. That's especially as these models get very, very capable. I think that works for most customers.
Totally.
Yeah, and for those kind of small number of customers, so fine-tuning is part of it. So you can fine-tune and then use that fine-tuned model. We make that very simple to do as well. And then for, as I said, small number of customers, we'll work with them to train and then use that trained model inside Snowflake.
Very cool.
Yeah. I mean, you said it must be an interesting place to sit where you see what people are selecting on the model side. Any patterns you're noticing? You obviously support a bunch of them.
Yeah, we support a bunch of them. And maybe not surprisingly, but somewhat surprisingly, customers start selecting the models based on brand versus capability, right? We have very capable models that aren't used as much because the brand recognition on those models aren't there, even though the models are super capable. So that is one relatively surprising thing.
Engineers are human, I guess. Yeah.
Customers are asking for assistance on how do I select these models, of course, and we have started facilitating that. I think the LLM evaluation framework being easily accessible will help in that direction as well.
What does it take to support the new models? Mistral came out with a new model last week, and Llama, I think the week before that. Are those easy to incorporate into Snowflake? Do you guys need to update your infrastructure to support those?
So we're very fortunate to have the VLLM team be part of Snowflake. Well, the founders of the VLLM team are now in Snowflake. So we need to make sure that the inference stack supports the models. And because VLLM is relatively popular, when the models come out, they come out with support for that. But previous week, a Llama 3.1 405B model came out. And there we built a series of optimizations into VLLM so that very large model can be run with a lot of efficiency. And multi-node inference, for instance, we started supporting a lot of optimizations there, both on inference as well as fine-tuning. And then we upstream those upgrades to VLLM, working with the VLLM team. So
Amazing.
Overall, usually the running new models is relatively straightforward, but of course, when large models, new architectures come up, we need to upgrade our stack.
Did the VLLM folks join as employees, or it's a project out of Berkeley, right?
It's a project out of Berkeley. So so we have a couple of folks who are employees. Yes,
that's awesome. Well, congrats! I'm sure there's a lot of big companies chasing the hot AI talent. So
they're great.
Yeah.
Do you think that 405B model will be widely used, or is it almost too big for a lot of these end use cases?
It is a very capable model. It is a large model, so it's slower. However, it's from a cost perspective, it is still not unreasonable. So we're seeing usage of it. We're also seeing usage of the model for fine-tuning purposes, distilling other models' purposes. It's a very, very capable model and broadly available. You can use it for synthetic data generation. You can use it for kind of distilling your model. So overall, having that more flexibility in the terms to be able to use that model for other purposes is a huge advantage for the ecosystem, I think.
Yeah, I thought that was the coolest part, that you could do model distillation with it, and you could have this big model. I would imagine even for things like SQL generation, you could say, hey, big model, generate some SQL for me, and then maybe have that train a smaller model or fine-tune something else. So super cool.
Like, it seems like today there's obviously enterprises are kind of just searching for use cases where this stuff really works. And it seems like you found a few, and I'm sure people are looking for more. On the cost side, are you finding that there's actually places where enterprises have identified a good use case, but it's like too expensive at scale? Or are we still mostly in use case discovery mode versus having found those use cases, but still waiting for the cost to come down?
I'm not seeing a lot of, hey, this is too expensive for me to turn into production yet. But as I said, in the POC phase, everyone is using these large models and them doing the proof of concept. And because a lot of the current use cases are internal focused, the volumes aren't massive to be super worried about costs. And the costs have been coming down very rapidly. So I know everyone is very aware that these models cost a lot. But because the number of massive production use cases have been relatively low, I haven't seen it be a huge blocker. I don't think people are at a point where, hey, I want to deploy this very broadly, but cost is an issue.
What's the future have in store for like Arctic LLM? Obviously, you've got other open source models that are investing a ton in compute, and do you want to keep up with the Joneses with that, or was this enough to kind of get it off the ground?
Yeah, our goal is not to build a fully general purpose model that competes with GPT-5. That's not the goal. It is to focus on Snowflake customers' specific needs. So we are focusing on kind of SQL generation. We're focusing on kind of RAG quality. These are areas that we're doubling down, and Arctic is helping there.
I think it'd be really interesting if you talked a little bit about like Cortex Guard, and we've kind of alluded to some of this, like the stuff that comes around the deployment of these models on the security side. Wondering, one, like just kind of some of the emerging patterns you're seeing around privacy, protecting against prompt injections, all sorts of things that enterprises are thinking through.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I was actually just today having a conversation about open source models. People are wondering, are the guardrails on open source models, better, worse than the proprietary models? And turns out, Meta has done a great job in aligning Llama, but then providing something like Cortex Guard using Llama Guard underneath as a additional guardrail is very much resonating with the market, because this is uncharted territory for many businesses. The responses are completely unscripted. So they want reassurances, they want guardrails on what these models can do. Many companies want to make sure that not only from a policy perspective everything is lined up, but also from a kind of brand perspective everything is lined up. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of kind of additional guardrails that are kind of being built into these models.
Yeah. What are we like missing today? I mean, when of all the kind of enterprise concerns you had, I'm sure some of them you're like, no, we're good there. We can solve that. And other ones you're like, yeah, that is a legitimate concern.
We've touched upon a couple of them. Hallucinations are still a concern, and measurement is still not mature. For many companies, quality when it comes to more complex scenarios like text to SQL is still a concern. And then, of course, everyone's hot topic. The agentic systems are coming, and this is just uncharted new territory. It's super exciting. There's a lot of potential, but it's just getting started.
Would love to talk a little bit. You mentioned the Truera acquisition around evaluation. More broadly, like how do you think about acquiring companies in the AI world versus partnering with them? And then, I'm also curious on the with Neeva, like how you've incorporated that into the product.
I'll start with the second one. Neeva acquisition was instrumental for...
got you a CEO.
Yeah.
We got our CEO.
Do you have to say it's instrumental because he is the CEO now?
It kickstarted a lot of our efforts. Cortex Search, for instance, uses Neeva technology. The underlying embedding model uses Neeva technology. A lot of the folks that we brought in addition to the CEO, are core valued partners of engineers in the team. I think Neeva technology is a big part of our offering. To go back to the first part of the question, We are partnering with a lot of model providers today, for instance, Mistral, Reka, AI21. These are good examples. We're investors in some of them as well. In addition, we're partnering with companies like Lending AI that have not just models, but also full end-to-end solutions. And we're bringing these partners as applications on top of Snowflake so that Snowflake customers who want to make sure that their data is still secure and they don't want to take their data out of Snowflake, they can just still use these very capable end-to-end products within the Snowflake boundary. So our partners can run applications inside Snowflake that directly can access Snowflake data.
I'm also curious, like how you're using LLMs and AI internally for your teams at Snowflake.
We are using LLMs in a series of different places. Our sales teams are using it to understand from sales conversations, getting summaries of kind of why are we winning, why are we losing. That's a very internal use case that's interesting. We have employee assistants that are built inside the company so that you can ask questions of internal data documents. We have use cases that are documentation oriented as well, just regular chatbot type use cases, and then AI being a core enabler technology now. A lot of teams are taking AI and then incorporating it into the full stack. For anywhere from optimization of our SQL engine to our marketplace, bringing AI and AI capabilities into the marketplace. So we're using it both for kind of internal purposes as well as product development.
One thing I know our listeners will be interested in, so I'll ask about, is just how you think about like comparing and contrasting the Snowflake AI strategy to Databricks and what they're doing.
I'll say at the core of what differentiates Snowflake is the ease of use. We think of ourselves as a single product, and everything works well with each other, and that makes it difficult to develop, but very delightful to use the product. So AI is no different. We've made AI incredibly integrated and easy to use. And then on top of that, because of some of our acquisitions like Neeva and our investments, when it comes to quality of these systems, either text-to-SQL system with a Cortex Analyst, as well as Cortex Search from a RAG perspective, we have very high quality systems that our customers can use very easily. I say those are main ones, and of course, governance is an important part. Both companies are of course investing in governance, and we have pretty simple to use tools that we've been investing over the long run for governance.
Do you think the vision of like the end-to-end platform is kind of the same, or actually is there slightly different approaches in how you're each going about it?
Both companies are approaching it from slightly different angles. For instance, when Cortex launched, we started showing Cortex with SQL. I think we are one of the first companies that kind of integrates SQL AI into SQL as the first thing. So depending on where the customers are, where the audience is, the products are slightly different.
And I guess I'm curious because it feels like you're building such a comprehensive end-to-end offering in Cortex. Are there opportunities for, like, as we see infrastructure companies pop up all the time, and there's folks doing like bits and pieces of what what part of Cortex is, or maybe future parts of Cortex. Mm-hmm. Do you think there are opportunities for startups like within the AI infrastructure stack, or is the kind of future converging on these like end-to-end platforms that kind of consume almost all these different parts of the stack?
Yes, absolutely. There are opportunities. I think the market is massive and it's only going to grow, and the opportunities for startup at various aspects of the stack will be there. I'm already seeing really awesome startups in the infrastructure parts of it. We're talking to them, we're working with them as well. There is value to end-to-end from a end customer perspective. We talked about this AI governance boards choosing the platform. However, there's still we're seeing a lot of innovation in the whole stack. So there's always opportunities for startups.
You guys have obviously shipped so much on the AI front already. What are the big pieces of functionality or products that you're most excited about, or kind of the next iteration of them?
I've been talking about just using natural language to talk to data broadly, talking to unstructured data, talking to structured data. We are going to be enabling agents as well to plug into the system. I'm really excited about using the full ecosystem from a customer's perspective and enabling a lot of what has resonated for our customers on Snowflake is these things like making it very, very easy to share data. So because it's such a huge data platform, data cloud, it's easy, for instance, for an asset manager to have access to the financial ecosystem, SMP or FactSet data. And as all these companies turn their data into AI-ready data, now a company like Morgan Stanley can easily build a chatbot that plugs into all of this. So bringing the whole ecosystem together, building on top of the data that's already built in, is a huge opportunity. Making that not only seamless but also rich as an ecosystem play.
Makes sense. Yeah, it's fascinating because I think there's very few companies that have the opportunity to do that because it's hard to get the data sharing working. But since it's all under Snowflake, then you can say, hey, it's already all in Snowflake, and then we can build a model on top of it. So
that's right, exactly. So it comes with a lot of kind of governance and security guarantees. Yeah.
What are the categories of like AI infrastructure that you find interesting or looking at the ecosystem and kind of excited about?
I mean, the inference stack is still developing so fast, and each improvement results in reduction of cost, and that's really welcome. So I think there's a lot of innovation still happening there. So I'm super excited about it because it immediately translates to cost. Yeah.
Do you think there's like long-term businesses to be built on the inference side?
It's a hard question
for us too.
There are a lot of companies clearly in the playing in the space. The costs are coming down dramatically, but I think there's a scale play. So I think there's businesses to be made, but I don't think it's going to be many successful ones.
I feel like, in addition to your fascinating role at Snowflake, you've done a lot of cool things in your career before. And one of them, I think, especially relevant to this moment, is you ran Google AI on Android, right?
Yes, right. Google Assistant.
Yeah. And so I feel like, your role is fascinating here. I'm sure if you were still doing that, that would be really interesting. Like, how do you think about what's going to happen in that world? And what would you be doing if you were still over there?
So a long time ago now, I started this product called Google Now. So Google Now was a very early, AI company AI product at the time, and then that morphed into Google Assistant. And I used to joke after a decade of working on this, Google Assistant essentially used to be a series of use cases that are kind of handcrafted, right? And then LLMs came, and now it's a little more general purpose. And I thought, okay, finally this thing works. And it's super exciting that it actually, going from a handful of curated use cases to something that is not going to fall, through the cracks that are naturally going to show up in a kind of use case by use case scenario. I am very excited about that world. Like, I think what has captured the imagination with all these assistants is finally starting to show signs of utility. And then, ChatGPT is doing a phenomenal job there. But as all these, so far, these assistants have taken action. You can set alarms, you can set timers, and you can start playing music. Now with LLMs, we're starting to get there. As these LLMs are able to call all these APIs to take action, I think it becomes incredibly powerful. Yeah.
What do you think those assistants will look like in 5-10 years?
Her movie has captured the imagination, right? So I think
that comes up in half the episodes.
Yeah,
there's
that prescient movie.
I actually really like, not necessarily the her. I like the her vision too, but this idea that you have many small specific agents that you've set using natural language that are just going off and doing things on your behalf, and I like that idea quite a lot, because when you look at everyone has very unique, specific things that they're trying to do. And that is why being able to set alarms applies to everyone. Sure, sounds good. But then when I'm doing something specific at work and I want this AI to be checking whatever on this website on a regular basis to see if something becomes available, that is maybe unique to me. So being able to create these assistants, these agents that are very easily created, I think that there's an opportunity here that I get very excited about.
Yeah. Are you seeing any of your customers begin to implement agents, or is it still early days of that?
It is early, but our customers are starting to do this. With something like BI, for instance, it's an agentic system. You need to figure out, okay, when am I going to generate the SQL? When am I going to evaluate the SQL? I'm going to run it, get the data, and then reason about it. So that is one very specific BI use case that is agentic. But it's just starting to emerge.
Yeah.
I've been very impressed with ChatGPT's data analysis, which is kind of a BI light type workflow, but you can give it screenshot of Excel, and then it will, go back and say, hey, we tried this Python transformation, didn't work. Okay, now we go update it. And you're kind of following along, but you're not doing that much. And it's, I don't know, an interesting glimpse into the future of kind of BI and data analysis.
We all thought Pat was doing a lot more work, but it turned out
exactly. Yeah, it was just I just been using ChatGPT for a few months longer than some folks. So that's my secret.
And I use LLMs to write very complex, Excel formulas, for instance, and then brag about it. Hey, look at this formula.
Yeah, I guess it really it definitely equalizes a lot of that. We always like to end our interviews with a quick fire round where we get your thoughts on a few things. Maybe to kick it off. Would love one thing that's overhyped and one thing that's underhyped in the AI world today.
I think underhyped is evaluation. Overhyped, based on where we are today, is... I was going to say agents just because it's just starting. There's a lot of hype about it, but I think it will match that hype, but we're in the early innings.
Maybe agents in the short term.
I always joke that I feel like we've gone through a full hype cycle already with agents. There was this peak of excitement and then trough of disillusionment, and now we're
climbing back up. What's been the biggest surprise in building Snowflake AI? Maybe one thing you thought that would work that didn't, or one thing that you thought wouldn't but ended up working in the end?
The text-to-SQL part. We knew how complex and challenging it would be. And defining the exact problem to solve has been hugely, unsurprisingly, but it's a core part of the solution. So to me, that was perhaps not surprising, but really it's a process that you have to go through, and then going through that process was very informative.
Yeah, we've actually heard that from a couple of folks, which is kind of the classic machine learning things of defining the problem and what good looks like still very much ring true in LLM world.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. People always like to do the closed source versus open source comparison, and obviously it's not one or the other, but curious how ubiquitous you think open source models will be versus kind of these state-of-the-art closed models in the future.
I mean, companies like Meta especially, but also Mistral have been hugely influential in communicating that it's not only an industry that only has two players. So having all these open source models and then flexibility for the whole ecosystem to emerge around it, and then to take these models and then do awesome things with it, has been really, really welcome. So I think there's a lot of gratitude towards Meta especially. So that's great.
Which AI startup outside of your space are you most excited about right now?
I'm still very excited about model startups. When I look at Mistral, for instance, it's a very small team of very capable folks building amazing models and then moving super fast. And they've also done a great job of bringing these models and then creating awareness for them. So I'm super excited about Mistral.
If you were to go build an AI application like tomorrow, what would you go build?
So my background is all in assistance, and I'm super excited about how this whole space will shake out. So I'll probably do something in that space.
Have you seen anything on the startup side that you found particularly interesting in the assistance world?
No, I've been paying attention to a couple, but nothing yet. The tricky thing about the assistant space is it wants to be a platform. But as a startup, you cannot start as a platform. There's a tricky chicken and egg there.
Is there a place for a startup to start there?
I think the only place for a startup to start is to nail a couple of really deep use cases versus I'm going to just do many small ones and then hopefully it'll work. So identifying a couple of deep use cases is really important. Devin, for instance, has gone, I'm going to go build an engineer and then have that be a thing. I'm seeing startups that do something similar. Here's a salesperson. Here's a SDR and so forth. So that's an interesting thing. Rather than selling quotas in APIs, you're selling, okay, do you want one Devon or two Devons?
Yeah.
Which is interesting as a concept.
We're waiting for the here's a podcast host, and then Pat and I can just go hang out.
Yeah, I personally, I'm very excited about travel on the consumer side. I think that would be make for some killer agents, I guess. So, what company besides Snowflake do you think it would be most interesting to run AI right now?
I find platform companies very interesting just because of my background.
Yeah.
So having worked at Google for a long time, and then platform has an opportunity. These capabilities are incredibly exciting, but they are waiting to become platforms. They're not yet platforms. So I think any of the main players who are kind of waiting to build platforms are super interesting from a large company perspective. They are not startups yet. From a startup perspective, I would, the application space is just forming. And I think over the next 2 years, when I talk to customers, we're now transitioning from, here are a bunch of building blocks, go build whatever you want to. No, I actually want the product end-to-end that works. And then these areas are becoming more and more clear. Customer service is the most obvious one that was there, but increasingly there are other ones. So customers want end-to-end solutions. So I think application space is going to be the next, hopefully we'll see a lot of flowers bloom in the next 2 years.
Yeah. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. I'm sure there's a lot of threads folks will want to pull on. So I'm going to leave the last word to you. Like, where could folks go to learn more about you, about kind of all the stuff Snowflake's doing in AI? Feel free to point people wherever you'd like.
For Snowflake, I think our Snowflake AI website is the best place. And we've just recently did our summit event, and there are a lot of awesome videos on YouTube that talk about all the things that we do on Snowflake.
Awesome.
Amazing.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much. This was a really fun episode.
Of course, thanks for having me.